first time they try Bolt, it feels like that ChatGPT moment, like, whoa, this is possible. That's because you can go to it and you can say, hey, like, make me a website for my wedding, or like, you can kind of build anything. For the first time ever, people who are non-technical or like not developers can actually build real apps and not like this Wix drag and drop sort of site builder thing.
There's other companies that have seen extremely rapid growth in sort of like this AI wave. What's changed on the technological level that you think is enabling this new generation of companies to grow this fast?
We've crossed this chasm where when you tell the model to write some code to build something, the reliability of getting something back that will actually run and work and look beautiful it's amazing. One of the things I love about Bolt is you just go to bolt.new, it's the easiest domain in the world to go to. And so just to like start off with something simple, I will say, make a clone of Spotify, and I'll go ahead and hit enter. And so again, it's like the experience of ChatGPT where you're like telling it to go and build something. And this is where it is different from ChatGPT. For the folks that are not technical watching us, this is what's considered a dev environment, but basically it's running a full operating system in the browser where it's like writing code, it's going to be installing stuff, etc. And at this point, you can kind of just sit back and let this thing, write this code, do its thing. It'll probably take, maybe less than a minute here to pull this together. But what's really cool is like, if you're going to go and set one of these things up locally on your computer, if you're going to use Cursor, it would take at least an hour, even as an experienced developer, getting everything set up properly can take quite a while. And it's already set up. The AI has gotten to work, is making our Spotify application here. What this is actually building a web application. So we'll be able to like deploy this on the web or whatever. But one of the cool things we just rolled out was you can actually make native mobile apps. So if you have an app idea where you want it on the App Store for your iPhone, your Android device, you can actually say like, hey, like make me an app that's like, shows me all the coolest concerts, nearby me or whatever. I can actually go and do that, right?
Cool.
So, hey, so that's the general idea. I think this thing's just about done. It'll go ahead and boot up. There we go. All right. And so it finished up, and we should, in a second here, see our Spotify clone. There we go.
Oh, wow. That's pretty realistic.
Yeah, it's incredible. So this is using the latest Sonnet 3.7 stuff. And 3.5 was good as well, but it's 3.7 is even better. So I can actually just keep prompting this thing like, hey, like, make the music player work and et cetera. And like use the Spotify API to actually play music and that sort of thing. And so if we sat here for like 30 minutes, we could actually have a legitimate clone of Spotify where we could be playing music and whatever. One other thing I want to show is like, if you make a cool app you like and you want to share it with your friends, you can just hit this deploy button. And what this does is it actually goes ahead and builds the application, like the production version of it inside of your browser. And it's just, you don't have to even set anything up. Like this is without even, creating an account. We use this service called Netlify for this, but it'll automatically just go and deploy it. And so there's a real URL. I just think this is like the easiest way to create a website that's ever existed, right? And not just a website, but like a web application, So that's Bolt in a nutshell.
I am super excited for this one. I have Eric Simons with me, who is the CEO of Stackblitz, the company that's built bolt.new, which I'm not even sure how to describe it exactly. It's like, an IDE for writing code, or just, like the ChatGPT for building applications at this point. What I do know is that it's absolutely taking over. I think the publicly shared number at this point is $20 million in annual recurring revenue in about 8 weeks or so, which is phenomenal, almost unheard of at this point. Actually unheard of. I haven't heard of a lot of companies who've done that. Eric, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. When we were originally launching it, the original kind of way that we were describing the product ourselves is like, think like ChatGPT, but for building web apps and mobile apps, basically. So that's like, I think a very accurate description, especially like the experience itself. That's kind of exactly like what it feels like,
Yeah, I think a lot of folks who are listening to this are probably hearing us say ChatGPT for building an application, and they might think, surely it's not as simple as putting in a prompt and a full stack application pops out the other end. But it kind of is like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it totally is. It kind of like blows your mind. Like a lot of people that try it often will say, like the first time they try Bolt, they're like, it feels like that like chat GPT moment, like the first time you tried chat GPT, it was just like, whoa, this is possible, that's because you can go to it and you can say, hey, like make me a website for my wedding, or like, hey, make me a website for tracking all the best concerts that my friends and I should go to this year or whatever, and like, and schedule them, and you can kind of build anything, right? And
Yeah.
but it's like for the first time ever, you can people who are non technical or like not developers can actually like build real apps, and not like this Wix drag and drop sort of like site builder thing, which is like super complicated to use actually, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you just come here, you like prompt, you tell it what you want it to do, and it'll go and do it. And you can keep further refining it by sending more chat messages, just like you do with like ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
But now for actually building software applications.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's so many apps coming out at this point that is genuinely just hard for me to keep track, even though like it is my job as part of running Superhuman and the media company is finding all these new AI apps. But what kind of put it on my radar, number one, I think, is when you constantly see something pop up on your Twitter or X timeline, you know something is going on. And then what really changed it for me is I walked into the office one day, and then one developer and one engineer on our team were like, "Hey, have you seen this new thing?" And I'm like, "No." They're like, "Yeah, they literally just popped in a prompt. I think it was like build me an Airbnb clone or something like that," and it just worked. And I was like, "Oh, interesting." And then they're like, "Okay, I want to show you something else." And what they basically do is we're working on an app. So it's a sales agent, and they're like, this feature we were talking about, we kind of like mocked it up right here. What do you think? And I was sort of like, that was like the big aha moment for me, where I was like, feels like there is something very interesting going on here. The first piece being obviously you can put in a prompt and a full stack app pops out the other end. But the second thing that really stood out about the process was the way that it usually happens, because I'm the PM on the product, is I go into Figma, I design everything, I write the specs, everything else, I hand it over to the development team, and then they build it. But here, instead of me having to come into the office, mock it up for the day, then hand it over to them, we just skipped that 3 or 4 hour process, and we just went straight into that. So just wanted to ask you, it's like, what does this mean for design apps? As part of this research, I did see that you were friends with the founders of Figma, so maybe you don't want to badmouth them or anything, but I think there's a serious question, right, of what happens to the Figmas of the world, right? Because that was such an essential part of how applications and software was getting developed. But now, if I can just sit in the developer and just mock something up super quick, what does that mean for designers and all this, part of like the development process?
I think it's definitely going to change like design tools in general for sure, because and it's the same thing, like coming back to like if you compare Wix or Squarespace, right, for like making a website, they're very complicated because you have to like
They
drag
are.
and drop all these things, like they're very complicated tools, and that's kind of like what design tools look like today. Because I mean, before AI, that's like the only way you could like get your ideas out onto like a digital canvas, right, and turn it into something. But with AI, able to actually go and take English words that you type and or say, and go and scaffold stuff automatically, that changes things a lot from an interface perspective. And like the use case you mentioned of like you're using Bolt for rapid prototyping, like that is like one of the most common use cases we see, where folks are like pulling in a Figma screenshot to Bolt even, and then they're having it go and building out the prototype instead of building the prototype in Figma. Because with Figma, it's like if you make a prototype, it's like static, it's not like a real app, you're kind of clicking between PNGs basically, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
with Bolt, and you can actually get a real application, like a real piece of software that you can put text into and input and play around with, actually had the experience, which is so much higher fidelity from like a product development process. So I
Yeah.
think what we're the design tools that are going to really win in the future, I think, are the ones that really orient more towards this idea of really leveraging AI to go and like do a lot of the legwork on scaffolding things out and actually gluing it together and having a real app prototype that you're using,
Yeah.
versus just screenshots. Like this is already happening. People are already
Yeah.
not making prototypes in Figma or whatever. They might have the design system in Figma and the things that need to be pixel perfect and whatever. But then when it's actually, hey, let's go implement this, it's faster and higher fidelity to do it,
Yeah.
in Bolt.
Yeah, yeah. I sort of, read this somewhere. It probably was Mark Andreessen. It's the quote went something like, "There's no such thing as like a bad idea, just an idea whose time hasn't come." So there used to be things like, kind of food delivery service in the .com bubble, but that didn't work out. But now we have, kind of these massive food delivery services like Instacart and so on. And I'm seeing the same thing with like web development and building apps. I've tried, I've tried, kind of Squarespace and all these kind of website builders. I've tried the no code bubble thing as well. The reality is, for the amount of effort that it takes, you might as well just learn to code, right? And once you get
Yep.
deep enough, like you need to learn how to do this. And same with Cursor as well, right? Like I saw Cursor, I saw all the hype on Twitter, which is by the 100% justified. I went in and used it, and I was just like, I'm not a coder. This is too hard. Like building like something with this is like too hard. I even took like a 3-hour course on it, and I was able to build some things that were very basic, but I definitely wasn't able to build something that was, as a non-technical person, of the quality that I was getting with Bolt. So my question, kind of, flowing into that, right, is number one, for folks who are listening to this, right? Like some people, in terms of like at least coding tools, Cursor is like the kind of like big thing right now, right? It's like part of like the zeitgeist almost. What is like, for folks who are not familiar with Bolt, what is the key difference between something like Cursor or Bolt, and why would they want to use Bolt over something like Cursor?
Yeah, I think Bolt really lends itself well to people that are not technical, right? So we have like, I think 60-70% of people that are using Bolt are not developers, and the other 30-40 are developers. What's nice about Bolt is like, you don't have to worry about, you don't even have to understand how any of this stuff works, really. Like,
Yeah,
like you don't have to understand development environments. You don't have to understand software programming in any meaningful way. The more that you do understand, the more that you can get out of the tool, just like any tool, right? Like, I don't know the ins and outs of Figma, but I know enough to like be dangerous and like do basic stuff
yeah,
in it, right? Um,
yeah,
and so software engineers can, leverage Bolt to extreme degree, but the degree to which like so people who are really good at building products, like PMs, designers, etc., can use this tool is incredible. And so because if you look at Cursor, right, if you go to use Cursor as a non-developer, you have to like download Cursor, you have to install all this stuff on your computer to spin up dev environments, pull down repos, da 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 da. So before you're even like running anything, there's like
it's
some
hard.
hours of setup. Yeah, I mean and often a lot of people just churn out before even setting up a dev environment, right? Whereas
100%.
with Bolt, all of that is just in your browser. There's nothing for you to have to set up. You click, it boots in like 100 milliseconds. It just works, right? And so I think that's the that's really the magic of Bolt is it makes it insanely easy, to come and actually start building real applications, without really needing to have any meaningful, background in engineering or something like that,
Yeah, yeah, 100%. You said something interesting there, which is like, the slim majority of the users at this point are non-technical. Who do you think the core audience is at this point? Do you think it's the non-technical folks in the long run, or do you think it's the technical folks, or do you think it's maybe it's both of them?
I mean, I think the big opportunity here is like being able to bring PMs into the mix here, right? And like and designers, et cetera. Because if you wanted to build a software product and you weren't an engineer, the only way you could do that was through the fingertips of like a developer. And that
Mm.
was, it's very expensive. It's very slow. Like if you look at why does a product not end up as pixel for pixel high fidelity as it can, it's often communication issues. And so the most a PM could do, for example, would be like write a Jira ticket that gets assigned to a developer.
Yeah,
Um, this is what's happening here with AI, is incredible because we have PMs that are coming to Bolt, and instead of writing a Jira ticket, they're taking that text and they're entering it into a prompt and
yeah,
actually able to change the product themselves and iterate on it themselves. Like the PMs are able to write code, quote unquote. So that is
interesting.
that's a huge deal because now you're talking about like you kind of imagine over the next year or 2 years how the world's companies build software is going to change. It's developers are going to be able to work on really high value, intellectually challenging tasks, right?
Yeah,
And now PMs and designers are going to be able to actually do what they do best, which is crafting the product experience and doing that directly themselves and actually like again, quote unquote, writing code, committing that, etc. So
yeah,
and that's a huge market of people. There's like 25 million developers in the world. I mean, the number of people that are like entrepreneurs, PMs, designers, anyone that has like an idea for a website or an app. I mean, that's way larger, 100 million people, a billion people, right?
yeah.
So I think that's really the big unlock that we're looking at here from a market perspective.
Yeah, I think there's like, when you think about it, like let's kind of zoom out and broaden it, both the market and then the idea of like technology. So if you look at market, right, uh 90% plus of companies in the world do not build software, do not know how to build software because it's too technically challenging. And the 90% plus of people in the world don't know how to build software because it's too technically challenging. And then I want to sort of, broaden this into, I think that's the more obvious one. I want to broaden this into the idea of like technology. Is I recently was reading this book on 15th century capitalism and so on. And one of the big unlocks for capitalism in Europe or Renaissance Europe is around 1500s. They come up with the double entry bookkeeping system, right? Gets invented in Italy, and then suddenly it basically means the banking industry is able to function properly because you're able to track stuff more properly. You're able to scale operations within a company. A company or a bank is able to have multiple operations because there's a way to just kind of double tally, make sure everything's looking fine. Now that's a very primary form of computation, definitely not digital in any sense, but it was such a critical enabling technology for how kind of capitalism evolved from that point and how kind of, the economy evolved from that point. It was such like, a big unlock. It wasn't the only thing, but it, definitely played like a huge part. So the way that I think of it, right, is when I use Cursor, I was like, I came out of it thinking, this is huge for developers. This doesn't feel huge for me, right? When I use something like Bolt, that kind of feels huge to me. In the sense, like, not only is it huge for me as a non-technical person at a tech company, but it's just, yeah, kind of mind-blowing to me as a non-technical person in general. And I think that might be an even bigger opportunity. It's like, how can we get every person and every company in the world to build more software? So we just love, just wanted to, it's not really a question, but more of like a riff. And I just kind of, would love to get your thoughts on that.
I think that we're just going to see an explosion of more great products and great software out of this. And that kind of, as you're kind of pointing out, I think, right, that tends to be what happens here when you have technology that comes out that lowers the barrier to entry to making great stuff. And so there's a lot of people, like, if you go on Twitter, there's like people that are on opposite ends of the spectrum, where they're like AGI is here and it's all over, and it's people kind of go one direction or the other on it. I think the middle ground is so much more interesting and realistic, which is it's going to be an incredible era of abundance. And that's great. And that, I think that means that people have to compete. If you're going to be a business and compete in this new environment, like what worked before is not necessarily going to work now, right?
Yeah.
Like, different things are going to matter a lot more than they did previously, which is exactly what happened when during the dot-com era, and then the decade after, as the internet became extremely prevalent and mobile, right? Where before the internet, it's like, how do you run like a really great news organization? You own the distribution of newspaper and TV and what. That doesn't matter now. Right? Like,
Yeah.
that's no longer the strategic stranglehold that you have to control in order to build a great like news distribution platform or something, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things like that. The dynamics change, and the incumbents have to either evolve or they end up kind of withering away. And it's an opportunity for new folks to invent great businesses that are kind of built on new premises and new foundations, to go pave out a new future here, right? And I think that's kind of
Yeah.
exactly what we're seeing happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just great. I mean, it ends up being, I think overall, uh, you know, I think as an end consumer of this stuff, like, more competition, these sorts of tectonic shifts end up being a good thing for the experience and like how much it costs. I mean, from a cost perspective, right? Like, a lot of the folks we've had multiple, just the common kind of like cost reduction story here is like 99% cost reduction, which sounds insane, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like a tangible example is we had a guy come on to Bolt, build a CRM for $300, right? CRM, like this is like a heavy duty
Yeah.
piece of software. He had AI integrated in it, etc. He had gotten a quote for $30,000 from an agency, and it was going to take them 6 months to build
Wow.
it. And he built this thing in, I think it
Yeah.
was like a month, right? A month
Yeah.
for $300. So it's literally a 99% cost reduction. And so as an end user of this, it's like incredible. Like, the cost of bringing ideas into reality. I mean, anyone can do it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that to me is what's super cool about what's going on here.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you gave me like a very interesting use case there of someone who built a CRM, and yeah, I've used CRMs. Like they're obviously very heavy duty kind of pieces of software. Um, to make it more kind of concrete in people's mind in terms of what Bolt or this general kind of revolution in kind of text to app looks like, what are some more specific examples you've seen with Bolt usage for both technical and non-technical folks?
Like a lot of developers use Bolt to basically go from 0.0 to 1.0. And then they take that, what Bolt makes and go to Cursor and take it from 1.0 to 1.1, 1.2, et cetera. Right.
Yeah,
Um, and so often that's like they're making a new feature, a landing page, they're scaffolding out a new greenfield project, like that sort of thing. When you look at like non-developers, the range of what you can do here is pretty broad. We have people that are coming here to make their wedding website because it's way faster to
yeah,
just type in all the details in the prompt, hit enter. What comes back is great. You like drag in your photo of you and your partner or
yeah,
whatever, and it like uses it, right? So like something that's like simple, but you have a live site in under a minute, which
yeah,
is crazy. And that scales all the way to like the guy who made the CRM. He's not a developer. Like
mm,
he's a PM. He's an entrepreneur. And so the way that he interacts with the AI, and this is the people we have found the most success with Bolt and similar tools, is people that have had to manage developers or work with developers. Because when you're actually talking to Bolt, you basically get to treat it like a developer or something, you know?
yeah,
Um, and so like what you can do is, and that again, it took that guy, I think 3 or 4 weeks to build that CRM in Bolt. And what he's coming back and doing is page by page going. He didn't just come and say, "Hey, make me a CRM," and then just built the whole thing. He's
yeah,
like spec the thing out, kind of step by step. Hey, here's what I want, et cetera, et cetera. That's like very large. So that takes time. But there's a lot of people that also are making websites that are just simple tools, like, hey, like here's a mortgage calculator, right? Of like, hey, if you're
yeah,
looking to buy a house, like you can put this in, and that's like 1 prompt or 2 prompts, maybe 3 or something. And then, people will buy like mortgagecalculator.com or whatever, and then have it
yeah,
live. And they're making
yeah,
money just like from ads and, et cetera, because these are useful tools that people are running across, saving for later, sharing with
yeah.
their friends. So the range of things that you can build here is really wide, for people that are not developers. And a lot of it kind of, they're like all these tools, there's just like a learning curve, right? So like, how do you best control, the experience of this thing?
Yeah.
But again, having if you have a PM skill set or have worked with developers, you already have the majority of the knowledge that you need to actually be effective in using it.
So let's get into prompting, right? So like obviously if the prompt is the input and the app is the output, then the quality of the prompt obviously really matters. Now I've been prompting a bunch of different things from, kind of videos to presentation builders to app builders to just kind of general text generators like ChatGPT and so on. And I think the thing that you learn like pretty early on is like the more specific you are about what you want, the better the output is going to be. The problem for most beginners is cool. You can put in a prompt, you can get out an app, but I'm pretty sure most people who put in their first prompt are just like, huh, that's kind of not what I expected. And then they need to prompt over and over again to get closer to this thing that they want. And in a lot of these cases, especially if you're completely non-technical, have never worked at a tech company or been near a SaaS product, you might not even know the right questions or right prompts to go in there, right? So how do you think about, how much do you think something like Bolt needs to be user directed in terms of I should be able to learn and prompt it over time, which increases the barrier, right? Versus how much should Bolt ask me these clarifying questions as time goes by? Like this is something I saw with ChatGPT Deep Research, right? Like Research, the first time I used it, I gave it a prompt and then it asked me a bunch of clarifying questions. And I was like, cool. Like they understood this is a problem because I was just testing for this exact thing. Because I know my first prompt was intentionally vague, and they asked me a bunch of follow up questions. But I would say like the problem space or the possibilities for building a SaaS app are so wide. Like, is it even possible to ask these questions?
No, yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, which is like we've got some R&D going on that end of things where it's like, how can we just better pull information out of the end user instead of like you having to go learn a bunch of stuff? Can we go and kind of like pull out what is needed to actually make this thing what you want it to be, right? I think it's kind of like we're hitting it from both ends, which is there's the education piece of like how helping folks be more successful with the tool, and then there's the making the AI agent really great at kind of pulling information out of the end user,
Yeah.
proactively to make sure it kind of takes them to where it wants to go. When you kind of look at it, it's very similar to, if you run a web development agency, right? This is the problem. This is often a lot of the problem when you run a web development agency is, or you're a freelancer or whatever, is the client will say a thing and they very variable whether the client understands how to break that down into very concrete tasks, right, of what they want out of it, right? And I think that
Exactly.
it's actually very complicated, and very lossy, right, to do that well. And so I think that to some degree, there's been tools that people have been building to basically enhance prompts for Bolt, where it does this, where it like basically asks you about a whole bunch of questions and creates a PRD that you can paste into the chat or whatever. And so people are finding some success with those things. But yeah, I think that as we go forward, it's going to be a key part of this is how do you enable this for just like literally anyone to use in a really successful way. The experience that we are shooting for is like, hey, to the degree that you really don't need to even understand what goes into like project management of this sort of thing,
Yeah.
that would be awesome. Like that's absolutely where we want to be.
Yeah.
um so yeah, it's a 100% great thought, and and we're working on it. I imagine a lot of other people are as well, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit towards the growth, right? I think the most publicly noticeable thing about Bolt right now is just the rapid revenue growth at this point. Doing some research, I saw interviews, where you said 8 weeks getting to $20 million ARR. Absurd growth. What's the story behind this?
Yeah, it's a heck of a story. We had no idea. Like we were actually like on the verge of shutting down the company before we launched Bolt. Like,
Yeah.
and because we couldn't, we didn't have a product that was like generating enough money to make it make sense. And then we launched Bolt. It like went from 0 to 20 million ARR in like 2 months. And I think the big reason for that is that it was Bolt's it's a great experience. It's a great product. Like it's very fast. It's extremely reliable. And I think that's the previous 7 years of our company, we've been making technology that allows you to run developer environments in a browser really reliably. And to people who are not developers, what this basically means is like when you come to Bolt and you tell it to build something, you'll notice that like within 100 milliseconds, it like gets to work, right? That's only possible because of this technology we've been making for the past 7 years. And also the way we designed it is it runs entirely on your device versus a lot of the other guys doing this sort of text to app stuff, they're running servers, which you just run into lots of problems. You have to pay money for them. They
Yeah.
can be running Bitcoin miners and stuff. They will like freeze. Running it on the device allows us to scale seamlessly to really large amounts of traffic, which is exactly what's happened with us, right? At this point in time, kind of by no small margin, Bolt is, by traffic and revenue and whatever, is like the number one thing, as far as text to app in your browser products go. And a
Yeah.
lot of that is just the ability to deliver a really fast, very reliable, amazing experience that can scale to millions of people extremely quickly, is very unique to how we have built the product, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so all this has been word of mouth growth. Like we haven't spent any money on marketing still really today. It's just been people that try the product, fall in love with it, tell their friends, more folks sign up, kind of rinse and repeat.
I want to sort of like, maybe go one click up, which is that Bolt, I think maybe has been, sort of like the big story here, but there's other companies that have like seen extremely rapid growth in sort of like this AI wave to a degree that we haven't seen before. Like there's a clear step change in terms of revenue growth that's happening. I have some theories as to why this is happening, but I'd love to get your take on what's changed maybe on the technological level, the distribution level, the platform level that you think is enabling this new generation of companies to grow this fast.
Yeah. I mean, I think especially in like the code generation space, like we're seeing incredible growth happening, right? Um, and the main reason for this is that AI models we've crossed this chasm where you can reliably, like when you tell the model to write some code to build something, the reliability of getting something back that will actually run and work and look beautiful it's amazing. Like you can tangibly expect good results when you prompt these things. When we actually, I'd had the idea for Bolt almost like a year ago, exactly back in February of 24. And I had us, our folks built a prototype over the, a week or two, and using the state of the art models at that time. And it didn't work. Like what came back had bugs. If it did work, it was ugly. And we are like, okay, this is kind of a cool idea. Maybe this, the LLMs will kind of get to a point in the future where this will work. So we put it on the shelf, and then in May of 24, a couple months after, we got a sneak preview of the Sonnet 3.5 stuff, and we were like, "Whoa, okay, this could change everything here. Let's go ahead and
Yeah.
greenlight this and see what happens." And that has really what's driven like all of the products in the space, whether it's Cursor, us, or etc. It's like all of this stuff has been growing, exponentially since Sonnet
Yeah.
3.5 came out, right? And now
Yeah.
all the frontier labs are investing further, and just like earlier this week, Sonnet put out 3.7. And Gemini is doing stuff, OpenAI is doing stuff, XAI is doing stuff, and so this is only just going to keep getting better and better.
Yeah.
But that was like really a lot of credit must go to Anthropic here, because they had the insight of, hey, we can, using reinforcement learning, we can really deeply train LLMs to be extremely good at writing high quality, error free, beautiful applications. And that's a big deal, because you know code is text, and that's what LLMs are trained on. So like you can, and it's deterministic. It either runs or it doesn't. So you can do great reinforcement learning, which means that like you can quickly make models that are excellent at coding. And so anyway, so I think that's kind of the big wave that we're seeing, is that these LLMs are improving at a really rapid clip for writing software. And that's really not priced into the market caps of
Yeah.
companies today, whether higher or lower they should be. It's not reflected in the organization charts of how companies build software today, right? And so the revenue that's kind of flying into things like Bolt, like Cursor, whatever, is actually just, I think it's just the beginning of the trailhead, because this is going to be fundamentally a part of how, you know, not just software works, but I mean, the world runs on software, right? Like the software world order is getting rewritten here.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of my perspective on what's going on here.
So I think that the technology one is 100% like get that part right, and I think there's a lot of like good answers for that part. What I haven't been able to find a good answer for so far with like this kind of new generation of companies that are growing so fast is on the distribution end. I think one thing, and I've seen you mention this before, is being able to enable a lot of this stuff within browsers. Like you couldn't do a lot of this stuff within browsers. You had to download, set up your own development environment, do a lot of other things, or run like a model maybe locally somewhere else. Like uh, obviously ChatGPT coming to the browser, big deal. You guys coming to the browser, big deal. Kind of enables it's like that. The browser is like this platform where everyone's sitting. So that's like I think maybe one good theory. Do you think that's like a sufficient explanation of what's going on in the distribution end at this point, or do you think there's something else more nuanced going on in terms of distribution that maybe me and the rest of the market hasn't picked up yet?
The case of Bolt, at least, I think being in the browser is a key unlock for, especially for the non-technical audience, right? And like that was why we built, the core technology that we've been making that allows you to put a dev environment in the browser. That was the idea. Like that was why we've been working on this for 7 years. Was we wanted to make it as easy to build full stack applications as it was to like use Canva, but that requires you to be in the browser, right? And to deliver that experience. And so for us in particular, it's like kind of this merger of that technology plus frontier AI hitting this new threshold where
Yeah.
suddenly like my mom, who's 73, built and deployed her first website, a couple of months ago using Bolt, right?
Oh, okay.
And that would be unthinkable. That would be unthinkable
Yeah,
6 months, 12
unthinkable.
months
Yeah.
ago, right? Even using
Yeah.
Wix, it's like, so I think we're going to see a lot more of this sort of trend where it's like, whether it's coming to your browser, whether it's a mobile app that you're using or whatever have you, to unlock the larger markets of folks that are non-developers to make, software, or whatever it is. I think that's, there's a lot of companies I think that are probably well positioned to go and capitalize on that and bring these frontier AI experiences to the browser, to your mobile phone, et cetera.
Yeah.
But again, with Cursor, that's they're not going to, and which is totally fine for them. Like they're not going after non-developers,
Yeah.
but that's where a lot of non-developers would hit problems when they were trying to use Cursor, was the fact that they couldn't just use it in their browser. They had to download all the stuff and, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Yeah. I want to sort of rewind a little bit to something that you said about 3.5 Sonnet earlier. Abundantly clear that this is, every developer who's coding right now is going for that. What I want to understand from a technical person's perspective is, why is 3.5 Sonnet so much better than everything else out there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I think the answer is kind of like maybe two parts here, which is like, qualitatively, if you go and, try Sonnet, whether like via their API or whatever, if you just like go and tell it to do something, the code that comes back, if you try and run it, it's generally a lot more likely to run without any errors. The designs that
Hmm.
it produces in the code generally are far more beautiful and functional than the alternatives, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then, kind of from a more like, why is that the case? It's, all these labs are rather secretive about how they do this stuff, but
Yeah.
um, generally speaking, right? I think what Anthropic is doing here is they are, specifically creating programs to train these AI models. Like they're just generating every type of program that could ever exist, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they will try and execute it. If there's an error, then they figure out what the error is and fix it, and then add that to the training set, right? They're probably having people that are manually classifying, like, hey, this is what a good design looks like, this one does not look good, etc.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about this is, like with software, you can run tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of these per second, and they're feeding that back into training their models. And I think they were
Hmm.
really the first people that really leaned in, took this seriously as their first order of business. And that's why 3.5 and 3.7 are so much better than the alternatives now. I
Yeah.
suspect all the other labs are doing this as well. I suspect we'll see models coming out over this year and next from them that are competitive, better, whatever have you. My view on this is that of all the applications that LLMs and AI can go and power, you're like, what's going to
Yeah.
be the breakout one? I think it's going to be software, like just generation of software, because it's deterministic, so you can reinforcement train to infinity on it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's I think it's actually the largest market you could ever dream of, because the world runs on software. So if you actually are
Yeah.
building something that can rewrite the world's software, um, the market opportunity is in the trillions. It's
Yeah.
everything, right? Everything's up
Yeah.
for grabs. So I think this stuff's going to get a lot better extremely quickly. Is my take. I think some of the other AGI stuff, people say like
Yeah.
AGI is going to come this year or whatever. I mean, I don't know, maybe, but like,
Yeah.
I'm much
Yeah.
more bullish. Like there's a very clear technical path, of how, AI gets better at writing software specifically, right? Versus this other
Yeah.
stuff where
Yeah.
it's like, a bit more hand wavy, you know?
I mean, we think about like MVPs, but I have like, I'm thinking about MV like Ds, like what is the minimum viable definition that something is actually going on these days? I think Satya Nadella had like a great run around. The economy needs to grow at like 10% per year for us to know that AGI is here. I think that one's like hard to fake, right? I think similar with like evals and benchmarks and so on. Like we constantly look at like, evals and benchmarks and so on. And, on benchmarks and evals, there's supposed to be models that are supposed to be better than 3.5. But, anyone you talk to who actually writes code is like, no, no, no. Like 3.5 is the thing, right? Um, have you have you used 3.7 yet? And have you used it enough to have any strong opinions on how good it is?
Yeah. We actually literally, like an hour before this, we just flipped it on, that's the default on Bolt now. Um,
Nice.
and it's good. It's very good. It's good in pretty much it's an improvement in every area over 3.7, from what we see. And, um, I don't think it's like, they call it 3.7 for a reason. I think that they're, whatever 4.0 is going to be, a step function, probably different than this. But generally speaking, it's again much more accurate. The designs are much more sophisticated and beautiful. Its ability to debug, and like they added reasoning to this as well. So you can basically tell
Yeah.
Sonnet how much it should think about a certain problem. And in Bolt, we did a kind of a cool thing where we call it dynamic reasoning, but basically the agent itself can determine, given the task, it can go, okay, how hard should I think about this? Right.
Yeah.
And it can actually just, and it's not like, oh, I am thinking hard or not. It's actually, there's a slider of like, okay,
Yeah.
how long should I think about this problem? So from those areas, it's a major improvement, right? And people that are already adopting it, whether in Cursor or with us, it's like it is able to do things that 3.5 could not, you know.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's great. Is it as dramatic as like 3.5 over previous models back in May? No, that was like a 0 to 1 sort of moment, right? And I think what we're going to be seeing here on out is largely large step function incrementals, and every now and then we may see kind of a black swan that's just kind of unbelievable. But
Yeah.
my expectation is we're going to just keep seeing models that are you know 30% better. And those are going to be releasing a couple of times per year. So every year, this is, what you can build with these sorts of LMs is going to double, right? Something like that. That would be just like a, kind of my gut estimate on it. But yeah, 3.7 in general is like, it is eliminating an
Yeah.
entire class of issues that people were having with our product, right?
Yeah.
That is just gone.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get your take on the larger debate around text to app, but just general kind of LLM stuff that's going on right there. Like there's a lot of memes on Twitter, the Rick Rubin ones, where like, the vibe coder and someone who's completely non-technical just being able to build $1 billion apps because they have good taste. Like good taste seems to be one of those words that's being, kind of going around a lot. And then sort of like the opposite end of the spectrum is like, cool, but when you try to scale an app and when you try to debug it and when you're trying to kind of get it up to 1 million users and so on and you're trying to add functionality, like good luck trying to just do that from like a text to app perspective. So where do you think, I think both are justified, but where do you think things net out? Like, do you think things are, the last couple of decades have all been about the technical person, right? um like your ability to code, your ability to be technical, like this stuff really, really matters. Whereas like, someone like Steve Jobs is almost like this like godlike figure in the tech industry, almost precisely because he was the exception, right? He was a non-coder who had exceptional taste. Whereas like everyone else, like, that didn't seem to apply to everyone. So what does the future look like? Is the future closer to Steve Jobs or Steve Wozniak?
Yeah, I think I think there's going to be more like more jobs, I guess, like people, right, that can succeed. Because I think like Jobs and Woz are a great example where without Woz, right, I mean, like Steve was just like a hippie with some interesting ideas, and,
The strong
and
case,
that's
yeah.
not to, I mean, that's not to belittle it, but like I don't think
Yeah.
that it, I don't think that and same thing for me and my co-founder. Like
Mm,
my co-founder Albert, he and I grew up down the street from each other in Chicago, and like we learned how to build software
mm.
together. But he's always been that strong technical guy. Without Albert, I would be a weird guy with interesting ideas or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's like I think that's just
Yeah.
the tangible reality. It's totally not a knock against
Yeah.
Jobs. Um, and so I think that this is going to be an enabler of people that are creative and like are entrepreneurial, right?
Yeah.
On the flip side, it's like when you look at a guy like Woz, right, or my co-founder Albert, it's like these deeply technical people. This is giving them superpowers. Like this,
Yeah.
the ability to have the AI augment their ideas to go deeply technical on stuff. In the same way, it's enabling the job sort of persona to build apps themselves for the first time ever. It's also enabling technical people to go deeper on ideas and different technologies and building that where it wouldn't have been possible before for them to do. And so I think we're going to see it's going to be on both ends of things. It's going to be looking great, right? So I think we're just going to see more innovations coming that are deeply technical and products, just kind of higher level, non technology specific innovations or whatever. I think we're seeing even spread of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. There's like so much stuff that's going on in AI right now. Like every week there's like 5 big things where you're like, this feels like it could change everything. I'm sort of honestly I'm just overwhelmed at this point, and I'm finding it hard to make sense of everything. Like, what are some things that are on your radar which you think are, are things that me or anyone who's listening right now should be paying attention to over the next like 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, good question. I think there's there's a lot of noise. Like, not to say that like there's always improvements that are coming, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for someone like me, where it's like my company is building kind of frontier AI applications, it's important for myself and my team to stand just the kind of the cutting edge of what's going on, et cetera. But a lot of the stuff that's out there is, we'll look at it, we're like, yeah, this is, it seems like this is kind of largely, not that it's not cool, but it's like largely hype, not something that's, um, because again, there's a lot of these like thread boys on Twitter that are like, so and so just released blah, and everything. Here's how it changed everything. Little like point emoji, and then it's just I mean, like that sort of stuff. But and I would say anything that starts with that, don't even read it.
Yeah.
But the things I would keep an eye on are just like, tools that are getting a lot of actual traction, especially if you're hearing about it from people that are credible, right? It's like, and that's not to say if you love going and trying stuff out, but they totally do that. Like, you go and try these different things out. But I think that there's going to be a lot of, really cool products being built, whether it's Bolt or other things that are bridging design to code and whatever have you. But like, there's a whole new world of capabilities that you're going to be able to up level that's already here today. And I think it's just going to keep growing. And I think it's a huge advantage. Like, the people that we know that are adopting Bolt for their personal projects or their companies, they're able to do so much more in way less time. Right. Which just makes them more effective at doing their job, whether that's building a great business themselves or building great product for the company that we work for. Right. So I think I would go and like try stuff out to really see, hey, how can this like make me better at what I do, because that's what all
Yeah.
this is about.